So, if we don't want to switch to a Cuban-style diet, but we're also faced with a future oil shock, something will have to change. We might have to find new ways to grow food that are less dependent on oil. Again, maybe we can learn some lessons from the Cuban experience.
I'm heading out to San Antonio. It's about an hour's drive from the center of Havana, going in one of these trucks turned into buses, which all Cubans use to get out to the rural areas. I'm going to talk to a man who claims he knows how to produce plenty of food in a world running out of oil. For generations, the countryside out there was devoted to one thing and one thing only, and that was to produce crops for export, sugar mainly. Now there are people who are saying that whole situation's got to be reversed. The Cubans have got to start producing their own food and depending on themselves for the food they need.
20 years after the oil crisis and despite the changing diet, Cuba still imports about half its food. Fernando Funes is working on a new low-oil, high-yield approach to farming that he believes could make Cuba self-sufficient and may have lessons for all of us in the future. It certainly looks very different to the vast single-crop fields you see in Britain. Here, there are rows of different plants growing side by side. Animals can be reared on farm waste, and they're also used to work the land. It's like agricultural mix and match. Every bit of land is used, maximizing production.
What is so good about having, say, 20 different crops on the same land?
This kind of farming that combines crops, many different crops, and livestock and so on, is able to capture energy from sun and to make a better use of water and nutrients. This kind of farming can be more efficient and more productive.
How efficient is it in terms of what goes in at one end and what comes out at the other?
In the conventional way of farming, about 5 calories are necessary to produce 1 calorie in terms of products. In this kind of farming, biodiversity makes possible to produce about 5 per 1 calorie input.
So that makes, by your calculations, this kind of farm 25 times more efficient.
Yes, that's true. With this kind of agriculture, I'm completely sure that we can feed our population.
What that means in layman's terms is that you can produce 25 times more food on the same land with the same oil. You don't use fuel-thirsty tractors. Actually, you couldn't fit them in between the rows of plants. And you can produce a lot of food in a small area. But this kind of farming is not a miracle solution. You need many more farm labourers. In Britain, that would mean millions of people working the land. And it would also push up the price of food dramatically. So why would we in this country even consider such a radical transformation?
See, Fernando, I can see why Cuba had to change, because it's a poor country and it ran out of cheap oil. But what about a place like Britain? Why should Britain change?
Well, do you have oil forever?
It takes a leap of imagination, doesn't it, to go from what I've seen here, the Cuban experience, to something we'd recognise back home in Britain. But the fact is, our farming is intensive and our farming is heavily dependent on oil. And sometime it'll run out for us too. And we're going to have to find our own solution to that challenge.